Well, we're joined now by Geoff Barton, the General Secretary of the Association of School and College Leaders. Thanks very much for being on the programme. I'm really interested to hear your view. I'm sure you've got lots of things where you disagree with the government, but on this particular issue, have they got the right method, do you think?
It's a very good question, Sophie. I mean, this is like everything at the moment. Everyone is cross about everything all the time. And you get into contentious issues like sex and relationships education. And I think if I was stepping back, I would be saying, so what should we expect parents to be doing? What's their responsibility? What should we expect schools to be doing? And I think that, you know, what was set up in 2017, which was a review of sex education, which was then published in 2019, pretty much did the job. It said in primary school, it's largely about relationships education. In secondary school, you start to get into some of the details about sex education. But if you looked at that, I think you would probably think it's pretty sensible. And therefore, the bit we're objecting to today from the Secretary of State is being inflammatory in her tone. We just don't need it. What we need is the people who I represent, school and college leaders, to know what they should be teaching, what they shouldn't be teaching. Is the curriculum right or not right? Is the guidance on gender and all of those more contentious issues, is that ever going to arrive? Because we've been asking for it for 4 years. And what we don't need is school and college leaders being talked to today like they're being addressed by the nation's deputy head girl. And that's what it felt like.
At the same time, though, I can see the concerns you've got about tone, the deputy head girl, as you described, the Education Secretary. At the same time, though, you say about inflammatory language. It is important, isn't it, to talk about what we are discussing in our schools. So, for example, like you might think that lessons around consent or about sexting are entirely appropriate, but we have seen MPs being really concerned about some of the things around gender identity, but also about porn acts, for example. There's been reports of choking being taught as, or safe choking, if you like, being taught in some lessons.
Oh, yes, we've heard examples of that. There was a bit of choreography, wasn't there, at Prime Minister's questions, where a backbench MP asked the Prime Minister to respond to a report that none of us had seen with examples that none of us had heard of, none of which is to minimise that. If that stuff is going on, it shouldn't be going on.
So you don't think it's true then? You don't think it's happening?
I just don't know. And that's why, frankly, what we could be saying today is I welcome the Secretary of State finally saying that we're going to have a review of sex and relationships education. It's in the interest of teachers and parents and leaders that we get this absolutely right because it's so contested. But the difficulty of all of this is the kind of finger pointing, the sense that schools are the problem in all of this. The reality, Sophie, is that I don't know who you think teaches sex education in schools. I don't know who your viewers think. I just know as a head teacher for 15 years that sex education was being taught sometimes by teachers who were teachers of religious education, sometimes science education. But in some schools, it will be tutors. So in other words, for the first 15 or 20 minutes of the day, your child will be in a tutor time, and it might be the school's decided that the tutor is going to do that. You've got to be really careful with that, because if you've got your newly qualified maths teacher teaching a group of 15-year-olds about sex education, it might be that the curriculum isn't right, and it might be the delivery isn't right. That's why the spirit in which we need to do this needs to be so careful and cautious. And all we needed today was the Secretary of State saying, I understand that this is contentious. I'm hearing rumours that there might be things that are not being taught properly or are not age appropriate. Therefore, I'm going to have a specialist group who are going to look at it. We would go into the Easter holiday saying, thank goodness for that. We've waited 4 years to have a really grown-up view of what we should be teaching and how we should be teaching it to children and young people.
I'm genuinely interested to know your view on this. Should parents always know what their children are being taught when it comes to sex education?
Well, there's a duty on schools to publish their curriculum. So just as you would know what they are teaching in the maths curriculum, the history curriculum, also schools should be expected to publish their RE curriculum and their sex and relationships education curriculum. I think what we've got in the letter today from Gillian Keegan is something which blurs the lines a little bit, because what she seems to be saying is publish all the resources there. Now, if she genuinely means publish all the resources, and some of those are resources which I'm teaching from a textbook or I've got videos here, that is a massive workload issue. If what she's saying is parents should be able to go into the school and say, can I have a look at the resources your teachers are using? Absolutely right. They should be totally entitled to do that. But that's why I think the tone isn't me trivialising the issue. I think it's really important we get the tone right to give some reassurance to parents that some of those outliers, some of those more extreme stories are not the norm. Most of us tread really carefully around an issue we all know is very difficult for us to navigate. And that's what the people who I'm leading are doing. And that's why I think they resent the tone of what's being said to them today.
Now, while I've got you, I am keen to talk to you about strike action as well. It's interesting to hear your description of the tone of the Education Secretary, perhaps pointing towards the wider relationship between union leaders like yourselves and the department. We've had strikes by some unions. Is the Association for School and College Leaders looking at industrial action?
It's a very good and a very pertinent question. We did exactly what we were asked to at the end of those 7 days of talks with the Department for Education. What they asked us to do was to take the offer that was on the table and to put it neutrally or as a recommendation to our members. The Executive Committee said we will put it neutrally, we couldn't recommend it. They did that on Tuesday morning. We're closing our survey of members in half an hour's time. We will know what members say. I can already say that lots of our members have responded very strongly to that. It looks to me like that pay recommendation is not going to be supported by our members. That will then lead us to say, so where do we go from here? And we have a window of time to say to the government, you know, if you've got school and college leaders saying they cannot recruit, they cannot retain, and pay has to be an issue around that, and the issue of what you've given us as an offer is not sufficient, you haven't got a lot of time to be able to do something about it, because there is a brewing sense, I think, from some of our membership that we cannot continue to have warm words from government around it. Now, what we will do is we will share that information with our members next week. We'll then pause and give them an Easter break, give ourselves an Easter break. But when we then get back into the summer term, there are some pretty big decisions to make about where we go from here.
I mean, it seems pretty clear to me that more strikes from more education unions, which probably means more school closures, definitely on the cards.
I don't know, but I simply wouldn't rule them out, and I wouldn't feel confident about ruling them out. And I think all of us would regret that hugely. We went into those talks trying to be incredibly constructive. And for our members, it's not so much about their own pay, their school and college leaders, but it is the case. I mean, we heard it last Thursday from the National Foundation for Education Research, that if you are a graduate in maths and physics, and if you want to go into a profession where you're going to get, I don't know, the ability to work 3 days a week from home, teaching won't be for you. So how do you compensate and say, well, teaching should be for you, here's what you get? Pay has become a bigger issue there, as well as workload and conditions of service. And I think there was a sense that we all came out of the talks with the Department for Education thinking they didn't understand seriously enough just how big an issue that is if we are going to recruit the best graduates to come and stay in the teaching profession.
OK, thank you very much for being on the programme there. Geoff Barton there from the Association of School and College Leaders.